my wife and I just watched Game Changers on Netflix. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen that, but my husband told me that.
Yeah, and I'm like, holy shit, we gotta go vegan.
Yeah.
Like literally starting tomorrow, I'm gonna be vegan. So like, we just watched it over the weekend, and I've already eaten a lot less meat than I normally do.
I naturally don't love meat.
Oh, I eat meat like 2 meals a day.
But my husband and my son is a self-proclaimed carnivore.
Yeah.
So how dare I have a meal without meat, right? But I personally just can take it or leave it, a little bit here and I'm good, but I'm like, where's the veggies? My son,
That's awesome.
he'll say to me like, Mom, let's go to Chick-fil-A and you can have a salad, because he knows like I'm gonna eat vegetables.
That's awesome. So. Are we recording? All right, sweet. Welcome to the AZ Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Hamid. Let's go. I'm here with Kate Sieker, Executive Director of StartupWeek Phoenix, and we were just having a great conversation about being vegan or carnivore. Your son is a carnivore. My son is a self-proclaimed carnivore. Yep. I want to continue that conversation because it was just getting interesting, actually.
Yeah.
And you have a daughter as well, right?
4-month-old Maya.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very
and then
cool.
my 7.5-year-old son, Owen. Mm-hmm.
So it's funny because my daughter started out like basically being a vegetarian.
Mm-hmm.
Like she would spit out if we ever gave her chicken. Like she was 6 months old, she didn't know what chicken was. She would spit that out, and all the way to like maybe 7 or 8, she like hardly ever ate any meat. And then my son was the exact opposite: fish, sushi, meat, everything. Like, has that been the case for your son as well?
It is so crazy that you say that, because actually my son was that way. When
Really?
he was younger, up until I think it was like 5, before he had a hamburger, he would not eat it. He'd eat Chick-fil-A chicken nuggets and hot dogs, and that was the only meat. Other than that, just all vegetables and carbs and rice and stuff like that. He had some food allergies when he was a baby, and then now it's flipped.
Right.
So it's like meat, and then he'll eat. I like always trying to put green beans or broccoli or something on his plate, and he's trying to give it to the dog.
So funny. So, and then this documentary Game Changers that we were just talking about on Netflix, it has totally changed my view on it. Like, it's super interesting. I'm like, okay, maybe I should eat a lot less meat. And you know who else is vegan, who I just recently talked with, is Francine Hardaway, who was on the podcast. She's like, been vegan most of her life. I don't know how long, but
of course,
and
right?
I'm like, geez, she's super healthy.
Yes,
She's probably the healthiest person I know.
I'll say, so because my son had food allergies, I went like super healthy. I also have autoimmunes, so I got real healthy when I was pregnant, and so now I don't eat gluten, I don't eat dairy, and I'm just very, very healthy, and I put my autoimmune in remission.
Okay.
And my blood work is all great, and I have to take less medications, and and it's just basically being thoughtful about what you eat and not eating crap.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
I think it's like, you can watch a documentary and watch how it impacts somebody else's life and sit there on your couch eating popcorn and and have pause,
That's
right?
exactly what I was doing.
But then, I know, right? We all do it.
Yeah. Did you have a camera in my room?
Yeah, right. Mine is like these pepperoni chips. My husband gets them for me instead of flowers these days. But I think when it happens to you, it's like it's a real thing. It's a remarkable food. Food is remarkable.
Yeah, that's awesome. My wife just started getting these instead of chips, these Shiitake mushrooms that are dried up, and they're super delicious. And apparently Costco just brought them. And of course, my kids love to like make fun of. Oh, can you give me that Shiitake mushroom? So now it's just like a running joke.
Oh gosh, that would be. I would laugh, even though you're kind of like, you can't really laugh. He's trying to get one over on you.
I've started saying it back to them now.
That's great.
Like, I told you not to get that Shiitake mushroom.
Have you seen the dried bananas that they're trying to put chocolate on at Trader Joe's? Yeah, it doesn't pass for me. But
I'm not a dried banana. I love bananas themselves, but not dried. Okay, so we have to talk about Startup Week.
Yes,
Phoenix,
please.
which you've been a huge part of. So tell us about that, or tell me about that, and then I have a bunch of questions for you.
Startup Week is coming. It's 5 weeks away. April 26th through the 30th. We moved it from traditionally end of February because of COVID. It's 100% virtual this year.
Okay.
So we had a lot of learning around that, and it's been a great event. So we have it traditionally is sort of the Super Bowl for our ecosystem, where everybody comes there and you can see the trends in our market, like what startups have grown and done over the course of a year. You get to see trends in our market, like, is it blockchain this year? Are we still a fintech sandbox? Like all of the things. And so people usually ask me those questions of like, what kind of tracks and what kind of programming are you having as an indication of what's hot in our state?
Right.
Which I've really enjoyed kind of watching myself. And so this year we're simplifying it because of the virtual component. We only have 2 tracks. It's either storytelling or tactics.
What's the difference? What does that mean?
So we have like a speaker that is going to tell you their story.
Okay.
Of course, their story is probably going to have some components of tactical advice, but a tactic would be like, here's how you set up a marketing funnel.
Okay.
Right? Or here's how you balance your books.
Yeah, super useful.
Yeah, so you can see that on our programming roster of like, okay, I'm a startup or I'm an entrepreneur. I was displaced because of COVID and I'm going to try to give this thing a shot and I need to know how to do this thing. And you can go on there and see. Surprisingly, which this was actually really interesting for me, I had a lot of people want to talk about product.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, right?
Okay.
Because traditionally it's hard to find.
What do you mean by that? Like what product specifically you should be using? Or?
Well, how to assess an MVP, how to conduct like, I'm told this is what we talked about in the session, of course, like TBD on that, how to market your product, how to establish a customer base for your product and know if you're on the right track. And those things are obviously very valuable. So I'm personally excited for those sessions.
Now, are the sessions like geared more towards like technology startups, or is it pretty much any startup? If you're like opening a hair salon, does the Startup Week sort of apply to you?
We've really tried to broaden the scope of our audience. Startup Week was traditionally, I think, more technically minded. And now we're saying we're entrepreneurial minded because in our ecosystem, I believe like the contractors or the consultants or small business owners make up a part of our demographic. So we do try to have something for everyone. Will every session be for everyone? Probably not. Right. And that's okay. Right. But generally we try to be generic around some of them and then very specific on others so that it can be meaningful for everyone.
Now, normally the event is live. It's in person. Mm-hmm. This year it's all virtual, but is it still live? Mm-hmm. And will the classes or the events be recorded as well so that they're available afterwards?
We have a YouTube channel that we've established. We will be having some of the sessions live are available on our YouTube channel, and then all of them are live. We have pre-recorded like half a dozen in case something happens. Right. That it doesn't like the whole works because we run a pretty tight ship. But yes, the large majority will be live.
How many sessions are you going to have?
Right now we have 32.
32 sessions over the course of
5 days.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, but traditionally we have over 250. So it's very much scaled back because we would normally have 3 or 4 tracks going at any given time and in a classroom setting. And we just didn't want to do that with, getting to know virtual, realities of a conference.
So I was under the impression it starts like April 1st, but the real or like the most impactful week, I'm actually not sure how we should say it. There's like the actual week that's late April. So what's happening April 1st to that week?
This is our partnership called Startup Together AZ. And so what happened was shortly after it was probably like September last year. I started hearing from all my friends out in the ecosystem about how we were really afraid, I think, of how this would be impactful or how this would roll out to our ecosystem. And we just kept on talking about over and over again these conversations about how we need to be coming together. We need to be, the leaders need to be stepping up and coming together. And there was lots of people that raised funds, which was great. But then how do you get those funds to have a real impact on the ground in the ecosystem? Like you can fund 4 people, but does it make a big difference?
Yeah.
So I called some of our friends, right? I called Startup Tucson. I called Flagstaff, Moonshot, Tommy Barr over at Local First, ACA, and said, "Hey, let's get together and show people that, like, let's create something so that people can see that we're coming together and that and see our work here." And all of them have events, obviously, all the time.
Right.
And so they were, sort of sliding scale, moving their events around, not knowing how to when and how to throw it. So we said, let's do it all in April. So we'll say April is for entrepreneurs in Arizona.
Gotcha.
So it starts April 1st. It's StartupTogetherAZ.com. My husband did the website for me for Christmas on Christmas Day as a present, and I tell him to update it weekly. And he's like, the present's over. So it's a little.
You're so much into community that your husband is giving you a community gift.
He is. I was like, I just made dinner. Can you do this website for me real quick? He's like, that is not an hour project. But anyway, he's the biggest fan, as your spouse should be, right? So if you go to StartupTogetherAZ.com, you'll see a list of events that are happening throughout the whole month, and there's some really good stuff on there. We have Biotech Week. We have Local First is doing a small business summit, Mentor Mania with ACA. So it's every week there's something big.
Gotcha. So all of those events are not startup.
They're not Startup Week.
Our
Phoenix's contribution is Startup Week, which is the last week of the month.
Gotcha.
And then we get to, on the last day of Startup Week is the end of Startup Together AZ. And I should say, cliff note, we've been talking about how to keep it going.
Yeah.
And so those conversations will come after in May sometime.
That's awesome. I mean, having that all concentrated in a single month is a great idea.
And I think
awesome.
the thing I'm frankly most excited about is driving a conversation for our ecosystem that is helping us decide as an ecosystem what we stand for. What do we want to be here in Arizona? How can we elevate ourselves?
What's the answer to that?
I don't know. I think it's a buy-in. It's a team effort. For me, I see us trying to be a tech hub.
Yeah.
Right. I see us trying to be a manufacturing hub, and none of them have really taken, to a point where we have a substantial amount of success stories that you can build off of. And so I think we need to get real with ourselves and come together. Everybody that wants to have a voice in that and establish it. And the thing that I think about a lot is I worked in Silicon Valley and I worked in Boston. And if you have a financial services startup, where do you go? New York or Boston, right? Because all the resources are there. And I envision a future for us in Phoenix where whatever we decide we want to be, that's where people come for that. And we have all the ecosystem set up for it.
Do you think that's a decision that needs to be made at some level, or is that something that just naturally occurs? Because people like me are pushing for software and SaaS, and somebody else is pushing for manufacturing, like you said. What do you think the answer is?
Well, I mean, you can look at it as a chicken egg problem.
Right.
I think sometimes you just do it, right? For a long time, SaaS was it. But you see less of that now. And so, and I'm not saying that if we choose SaaS or we choose manufacturing, you can't have other things.
Right.
I'm just saying that there is a lot of resources in our state to help support our entrepreneurial effort and to make really meaningful use of that money and make it go farther for more people. Some focus is needed.
It'd be nice for all of them to be aligned around a particular thing.
And I think I see a lot of times people talking about certain initiatives are like, oh, this is what we do in our state. And I've never even seen a startup that does that,
Right,
So how much of that is government or how much of that is just desire as opposed to reality. So I love Arizona and I want the ecosystem here to be strong and robust for myself and others. And so I am trying to drive this conversation.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I think one thing that we all share is that love of Arizona, which is kind of funny because, some people, especially outside of Arizona, people don't understand, like, what, Arizona? Didn't you guys have that stupid, like usually this reference to some stupid bill that like we made the news for nationally, right?
Yeah.
But the people here do not reflect those ridiculous bills, right? Like the people are awesome.
Yep.
Like the environment is awesome. There's such a great place to live. Pricing. What are your reasons that you love Arizona? Because you actually used to live in Silicon Valley, right? Like, and you moved.
I moved here 7 years ago.
Okay. What brought you here?
My father and my family has lived here for a long time. My father and my grandparents, and I didn't live here with them. They kind of like moved here, and so actually after my son was born, I had a failing marriage, and I moved down here to be near with my dad and my family to get help, like to get support. And while my then husband and I were trying to work it out, and obviously I got divorced and stayed here. And but I very quickly got a job from my contacts up in Silicon Valley with Weebly, when opened the doors in Scottsdale, and that's when I got exposed to Startup Week, and it's been. I see so much potential and so much promise in our ecosystem here that it's extremely engaging to me and exciting to be a part of it. And I also love that I can keep my windows and doors open most of the year, it's and swimming and, for a family. I remember when I first moved here, my friends from Silicon Valley would call me and they'd say, what does it feel like to live down in the desert? And I'm like, it's kind of like you're on a perpetual vacation, it does feel that way. I feel very lucky to have the quality of life that I have here, which would not be possible in other places I've lived.
Quality of life is huge in Arizona, right? Like, and pricing, you could afford a house. I mean, in Silicon Valley, you have to live in a 1-bedroom, if that, little studio.
Yeah, and it's a shit box. Like, we spent like $4,000 a month to live in. It was really 1 bedroom, but they put a piece of plywood down the middle and made it 2. And it didn't have any AC. That's
and that was 7 years ago.
And people were like, "You're so lucky to have this place." And I'm like,
2 years ago, it was even crazier. I mean, I think rent has been falling ever since COVID because it's sort of equalizing. People
they're
are
all
like,
coming to Arizona.
Exactly. They're like, I can get so much more.
We're a purple state now.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we've always been a purple state, but like some of the politics may have not reflected that. We had a who was it? The first female gay governor. There's a lot of good people here, and it's just, and even the Republican sort of hold is not that controversial, generally speaking.
Right.
They're actually doing smart things and pushing things in the right direction.
Yeah,
we're a little
bit like Oregon. We're the undercover state, right?
Yeah,
I feel that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love it here. I've grown up here, of course, but a little biased. But
I have to say, when I first moved here, I was really concerned about arts and food.
Yeah.
Coming from San Francisco, and the evolution in the offering of arts and plays and all of that stuff, and then restaurants too. I've just seen over 7 years a tremendous amount of growth.
In that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome. What are some of your favorite restaurants?
So on Camelback, there's a place called The Parlor.
Okay.
And there's a salad that has it's like this chicken masala salad. It's my favorite thing ever. And my family knows when I go get that salad, don't talk to me. I'm really just eating the salad. And they have this banana pudding, and I go there for my birthday every year.
How funny. That's
awesome.
So
good. And my son likes Pomo Pizzeria.
Yeah.
And what did he want me? And there's a taco place down on Roosevelt he drugged me to the other day, so.
There's so many good places.
Yeah.
All right, so you're also involved with Startup AZ.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what's the involvement there, and how does that relate to Startup Week Phoenix?
Yeah, Brandon Clark is a friend.
Yeah.
And Mike Jones and I ran Startup Week for the last 2 years. I'm running it myself this year. And when we took over, there's a lot of things that people don't understand about running an effort like that. So first, every year for Startup Week, you start at $0 and no bank account.
Okay.
Right? Because it was just this thing that you'd randomly get picked to run it, and then people would start emailing you like, what's going on? And you're like, I don't know. So Mike and I reached out to Brandon and said, Brandon, who was there then affiliated with the Arizona Community Foundation, can we borrow your bank account and help us with this so that we could be an entity that people could write it off and so that one of us didn't have to put a credit card in our name.
Right.
So he graciously, agreed. And so for the last 2 years, he was doing that. So this year, he's like, are you going to do Startup Week again? And I said, maybe. And so he said, well, I have some other projects that I'm working on too. And he said, I'll sort of incubate you, which means I get a Zoom account and I get an email, and I get to hang out and I Galvanize, and he's like, and go get them. So, and I also help with some fundraising around, there's different tiers of fundraising that happens in any kind of a foundation, and so the ones that are closely aligned to like Startup Week or whatever, that I work with those.
So I thought Startup Week was traditionally sponsored by, like, was it Chase or?
It's Techstars.
Or was it Techstars? Okay, wasn't there a bank involved as well?
Chase was initially, and then that was a relationship that Techstars brought.
Okay.
And that lasted, I believe it was 2 years. It might have been 3.
So that's over.
Over.
Okay. So each year you're like looking for new sponsors to help sort of pay for the costs of
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, Mike and I, over the 2 years that we worked together on it, were able to
Mike being
Mike
from
Jones.
Techstars?
No, Mike Jones from Resound.
Okay.
Locally here. We raised some money and we had like a little bit of extra in the account. We basically take ticket sales when we started selling tickets.
Right.
We take the proceeds of ticket sales, we keep it in the bank, and so we have some capital to start with.
Gotcha.
Techstars' involvement is minimal. They own the Startup Week brand, but we don't really have a lot of contact with them. We just kind of leave it and. That's that.
That makes sense. So so is it free for like attendees this year, or is it do they have to actually buy a ticket? How does that work?
Yep, we have tickets available. We lowered the price to $10.
Okay.
So we have to get something,
I mean that totally makes sense. So is it $10 per session? Is it $10 for the whole week? You have access to all 32 sessions.
100%. Yep.
Okay, that's pretty cool. That's probably the best purchase you can make for $10.
And then also you get to support our community, being able to have this event next year. So
yeah. Plus, I'm speaking at it, so at
least
that's worth like $9.
That was my favorite session. I'm looking forward to it so much.
I think I may have given you a little heart attack the last time I spoke at Phoenix Startup Week, because I started saying stuff that was not true, and you're like, "Wait, that's not true," and I was like, "Yes, that's part of the."
So as a consequence of that, I'm going to, for your Zoom session, I'm just going to be putting emojis all over your face.
Well, I figured you have a button that like bleeps me out, or like just that's not true.
A big hook.
Yeah. I'll show up with like, I don't know. There's all kinds of little things you can do now on Zoom, so I might show up with a different face.
Yes, exactly.
You won't recognize me. But okay, so people pay $10 for the week. Access to all 32 sessions. What about the events that are happening in April? Are those also paid sessions? Or?
Yep, each of them are paid, and I believe almost all of them are also $10, right?
Okay.
And so you can go on the website and you can register for each of the sessions. And
is there a place to go that sort of shows you like all the April events? What is that place?
StartupTogetherAZ.com.
Okay, StartupTogetherAZ.com. Maybe we can, for the video, maybe we can put that little website URL. Okay, so now you have, is Startup AZ, Startup Week Phoenix.
It's a tongue tie.
Yeah. Is that now its own entity?
No, the way I look at it is it's sort of a project, right?
Okay.
So I have Startup Together AZ, I have Phoenix Startup Week, I have #YesPHX that I'm overseeing, And then Thrive PHX, which is a diversity and inclusion effort for our state. So there's these 4 projects. I'm being incubated under the Startup AZ Foundation.
Awesome. Okay,
And
that makes
then
sense.
my job is to figure out how to make these grow and make them meaningful and authentic to our community.
That's fantastic. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. What's for people who don't know, when should they be using hashtag YesPHX?
So
Like, YesPHX is such a brilliant name, by the way. Who came up with that?
Jonathan.
Jonathan.
Jonathan Cottrell.
I say Cottrell. Is it
I think
Cottrell?
it's either one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love
JC.
JC, yeah.
There we go.
JC is awesome.
He is.
I love him. He
great.
came up with hashtag YesPhoenix to
I believe so. Yeah, I believe that's how the story goes.
Okay.
And then Matt Simpson was also very involved, and there's a small army of people. I'm currently creating a page for YesPHX to give everybody credit. So that was involved. It's a 7-year-long effort that they, when they found out the work that I was doing, they handed it to me and said, go.
And the idea is super simple. Is if you're doing something cool in Phoenix, use the hashtag YesPhoenix, and you're essentially promoting Phoenix, and YesPhoenix might promote you, and you know.
And this has been like as new companies come to Arizona, which I feel there's like 10 a week at this point. There's like a lot of interest.
Right.
They say, where do I go? And I say, YesPHX. Go to the website, sign up for the emails, go to the Slack channel, go to the Facebook group, and stay informed. And so you'll see more people on the jobs channel, like looking for help. I had 3 conversations last week about employers trying to hire that were new here, and they didn't know how to get involved in our community. And so, it's a completely, I feel like, an underutilized resource that we have. Like, I mean, what ecosystem has a Slack channel that you can like connect with everyone? So proud to be a part of that.
Yeah, and I forgot, there's a Slack community that you can access anyone in the Phoenix community.
Yep.
It has how many thousand people now?
A lot.
I should know. I'm like supposedly one of the administrators on there, but yeah, I mean, like, people can access, you can direct message people. I mean, it's an awesome community. I love it. So like, you're essentially all about community now, and like, that wasn't always the case. You were working in the corporate environment. What like made you make this sort of flip the switch and go from corporate environment to just focusing on community?
Yeah. So Phoenix Startup Week has kind of turned into my hobby.
Okay.
I love it. I just love the feeling of that week. And so it was like every year I would sign up to do it. And every year at the end of it, I would say, I'm not doing this anymore. And then it would be, I'd take a couple naps. And then I would be like, I got to get back into it, you know? So
people start thanking you, and you're like, maybe that was good.
Yeah. But I think the thing that was most impactful to me was how much impact I was able to create from being involved. And then feeling that, I don't know, and I'm quoted as saying this all the time, but it's like Christmas to me, like walking around in that event and seeing everybody engaged and networking, and it's this, I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
And it's being a part of something that's way bigger than just me. It gives a sense of purpose, and I love this ecosystem. So it was like an easy thing. So right before last Startup Week, actually 2 weeks before last Startup Week, my dad passed away. And Startup Week was actually the first time I came out I wasn't out of mourning, but it's the first time I saw anybody after his death. And it was a really, 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 really tragically hard thing for me because I'm his only daughter, and we have always been very close. And so when I got done with Startup Week, I quit my job, and I said, I need to take a sabbatical. I'm like a wreck. And so I went the next week after I quit my job, I found out I was pregnant, and then the next week COVID hit.
Oh, wow.
So I was home in March, really just sitting with myself, like, okay, shit, like, what do I do?
Wow.
I fundamentally believe that life happens for you. And that even when things like that are, wham, bam, bam, like, it's happening for you. What can you learn from it? And so I sat with my grief for a couple months before I could even talk about it without being a wreck. And
you're pregnant during this time.
I'm pregnant. Mm-hmm. And a pandemic. And so I started calling around. Brandon was one of those calls, and started talking about community, because when I talked about community, it made me feel good.
Yeah.
And it made me feel like, oh, I know how to do that. It's I don't know how to do life in general right now, but I know how to do that. I'm classically trained as like a head of people at a startup. I've done that for 20 years. So when you talk about creating values and mission and empowering people, I love doing that, and I've done it well in a lot of different places and not so well in others, right? So I thought to myself, well, okay, I gotta sort of find myself in all of this, and for sure my priorities changed. Like it wasn't okay for me anymore to make excuses for why I was involved in things that I didn't like, or that weren't serving me, or that I felt I wasn't serving. Like I just didn't want to do it anymore.
Right.
So it was a beautiful excuse to get really grounded, and so this community work just sort of like came to me.
Yeah.
I started talking about it to people that are my friends, and they said, you should absolutely do that. And I said, yeah, but here's the thing, like I do it. I have a lot of drive. So I just started doing it, 5-10 hours a week until it was built.
So you were doing it before last year as well, though. Like, so what changed last year? And like, it sounds like you flipped the switch to become 100% focused on that. Is that what changed, or?
Yeah, it's my day job now.
Okay.
I spend my hours. Yeah. I haven't looked for another job in people. I am really trying to build what I can for our community.
Yeah.
And it's feeling right. And I'm really, really, really excited at the momentum that is happening around me. And so I'm going to continue until it doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
And so I really hope that I can help bring together the right types of people and build some momentum so that there's some exciting stuff that happens for us.
So what was it like being pregnant during COVID? Like, what was, you're not going to, pregnancy classes or anything like that. What was that experience like?
It was lonely. It was terrifying. I would go to doctor's appointments alone. My husband couldn't go, and I'd sit in the waiting room with all these other pregnant women in masks and, like 2-3 seats apart. And I'd just sit there and I would like look at them and I would be like, I wonder how far along she is. And cause I thankfully that wasn't my first pregnancy.
Right.
Like, so I had some context, but it was terrifying. And, do you want to be in a hospital? Do you not? I ended up giving birth at home. I had a midwife at home. It was incredible. But even that experience was very touch and go. My midwife got COVID. She had COVID in her house, and so we were waiting for a test to come, and I was 41 weeks pregnant. So I had to find another midwife at the last minute.
Wow.
Yeah, like it was that. It was touch and go every week. And frankly, it hasn't stopped, right? It's the same, but I trust my body, and so I would have to remind myself that I got it. Mentally was very, very, very difficult to be grieving and pregnant. And as a result of that, I ended up going on bed rest for 10 weeks. Like, with someone that likes to get up and go, bed rest is a death sentence. It's so horrible. Right. I would just lay there looking at the ceiling, positive affirmations, positive, so mentally it was challenging, but also I feel really grounded. I cannot imagine anything that would shake me after that experience.
No kidding. I mean, like, holy cow, you've gone through so much in the past year. What was your dad's illness? Was it COVID related, or was it just
cancer?
Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he was in remission, and then he wasn't. And it was,
and it goes fast
6 weeks.
once it comes back.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, 6 weeks. But we got to the last 6 weeks. I mean, I was able to be with him in hospice, which was a deeply spiritual experience. And then, I mean, you know, like his life. So it was the anniversary of his death was February, and the day before the anniversary of his death, my grandmother passed away, his mother, and I was with her when she died, and I was the only one with her in a hospital, and she was like my mother. She like raised me, and so losing those two people were really, that was like, I felt like my childhood was over. Like, you know, it was just,
now you're an adult.
I'm adult, right? And that has given me a lot of things to think about as I had another baby, right? Because I don't know why this happens, but, you know, I'm 41 years old and I'm still like, oh, my grandma makes these cookies for me every year. And like, it brings me back, you know? But like, how can you honor someone that is just so meaningful to you and shaped who you were as a person? I've had to answer that question for both people in my life. And it's part of my grief process. And so what it ultimately has done is led me to a greater understanding of who I am. Yeah. And acceptance of that. And being unapologetic about what I need, right? My needs don't get put to side. I'm like, I need to cry right now, or I need to make these cookies, you know, and it's, I think I'm a better person. It sounds weird, but I'm a better person because I've grieved those two really wonderful people
who were so close to you. Mm-hmm. And when was your daughter born?
November of last year. Yeah. Maya,
congratulations.
Thank you.
On Maya. After, I mean, like in a way that you know, having a baby to take care of, that like it just rejuvenates you in so many different ways.
Life and death. I have a completely different way of processing life and death, of beginning and ending. I used to be really afraid of endings because I felt like endings meant failure. It's over, right? Like there's some kind of looming darkness there. I'm not, because all that endings are new beginnings. Right. It's just very cyclical, right? And now I feel like this weird sort of excitement, sadness thing about like, well, what do I want the beginning to look like? Right. Right. And my family now, my husband and my son and I, we have really become very, 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 very close, of course, because we're just stuck in this house, you know. But I think we accept each other, and we have learned a lot about what's important to our family. And so at the end of the day, that really is, no one's on their deathbed says, I wish I worked more hours. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, so it's been a beautiful, hard thing.
Have things like classes, I know when my wife and I had both my kids, we had like sort of, there was mommy and me classes and things of that nature. Has that stuff restarted yet, or? I
don't know. I haven't even looked into it. My son was remote for 13 months. He just went back to school 2 weeks ago. And then I was home remote learning and doing the things and having a baby. So I just kind of.
How old is your son, by the way?
He's 7.5. Okay. So he's in second grade. And so I've just like been out. For 2 weeks, I went to Galvanize a couple times, and then I've come here, and I was like, "Oh, I remember this place." So
we're one of the first places you've been to since. Okay.
Yeah, and we're just sort of like slowly coming out from under a rock. It feels like. So I haven't. You know, that's one of the things about having a baby is, you know, normally I would be out and about with her all the time, and everybody would be holding her. And I can count on my hand how many people have held her in her life, you know, and so we'll probably have some learning curve there. But I haven't looked at any of the classes yet, but maybe eventually.
All right. I'm going to change subjects on you. So I want to, part of what you touched on is that you used to run HR and build recruiting and best practices, I guess, for companies. Yep. I want to talk a little bit about that. First of all, what is it like being the head of an HR department at some of these companies? What were some of the challenges you had to deal with? And then, like, I want to eventually get into advice you have for startups in that area as well. Okay. So,
what's it like? A lot of pressure. Okay. There's conflicting priorities at all times. So, as the head of HR, your job is to represent the business, like understand the business and represent it in decision making, and then also do the same thing for the people in the organization.
Right.
And as you can imagine, there's 956,000 decisions that need to be made where those things are at odds.
Yeah.
So I think it's understanding like when do I need to stand up and advocate for people, and when do I need to stand up and advocate for the business, and how do I help? How do I best help?
How do you balance those things? Because those, like you said, they're generally in conflict of one another.
I always balanced it by understanding the priorities of the company. So there are some mountains that you're just never going to move, right?
Give examples.
So, for instance, let's see. Let's say the company needed a certain amount of output from their people, right? A certain amount of hours worked, or a deliverable. Let's say there's a product deliverable. This is a good one. There was a product deliverable, and the launch date is not movable. It is static. That's it.
Right.
So now, in order to keep people engaged to hit that product date, which we have to hit, there might be some things that come up that you need to be more complementary to the people side. Like maybe there's like this weekend is a no work weekend, or we're going to give everybody more vacation after this is over, or there's a pay bump or some creative bonus process, or maybe there is a special incentive for recruiting so that visually there's a lot of activity around recruiting, and then maybe that actually means help,
Right.
So that's an example. I mean, every employee wants more money, every employee wants more vacation, every employee wants more upward mobility in career planning, and there are different appetites depending on the company for all of those things.
Right.
So I've worked at companies that pay very, very well, but their expectations of the employees are extremely high, in many cases unachievable. I've worked at companies where their pay is subpar or maybe even median, and they're really fun places to work, and job security is high. So it's a trade-off as an employee.
Right. That's interesting. So which one, out of curiosity, which environment is your favorite to work in? The one where the expectations are high and like really, it sounds like really high bar, high pay, high performance, or
I would say
fun place to work, but maybe like subpar performance or whatever?
I have two answers. Personally, I like the high bar.
Okay.
Right. But I like to work with the companies because
you like the low pressure.
Yeah. I think the people are just happier.
Okay.
And so you get more creativity, I find. If it's a pressure cooker all the time, people get stagnant. Like it's almost like deer in headlights.
Right.
Their body can only handle so much, and there's sort of an underlying air of like discontent at all times.
Do you think that there's companies that are doing a really good job of balancing those two?
Yeah, I'll say here's the thing. Instead of balancing the two,
Okay.
I think the more important thing is management, right?
Okay.
So, like, you can do a crappy job at balancing them, but you can be a really effective manager, and a lot of that goes away.
Okay. How? Like, what's your advice there?
So I once had this manager that at first I was scared of the person, right? So he would always say to me, so I worked with him in Silicon Valley. He would say to me, if it's a good idea, just do it.
Yeah.
This is what I want. You're a brand new employee. You're employee number 30. This company has $30 million. We need to grow. We need to whatever. Like, you just go. And I'm like, okay, just go, right? And then I immediately started asking permission for everything, right?
Just go. But
then he's like, he like bring me in his office, and he'd be like, you don't need to ask permission, just go. And I'm like, but you don't want to know? And he's like, no, I trust you, just go. And so through months of working with him, what I learned was that I actually had a problem trusting myself.
Mm.
He trusted me.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Right? He trusted me. He's like, great idea. If it fails, I don't care. Like, just go. Learn about it, and then you'll teach us. And the idea of failing and trusting myself to do something and then failing was just paralyzing to me. I had to get over it.
Yeah.
You know? So I was like, okay, you got this great job. You're the head of people. Like, you just got to go fail. And it didn't make sense to me at first. But then I failed once, right? Very quickly afterward. And you know what he said to me? He's like, good fail. You know, what did we learn? And I was like, good fail. Like, you know, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And so we learned together. We actually had a meeting about it. And I said, you know, I'm so sorry. And, you know, like all of the things I failed at.
Right.
And then I had people saying, I would have never thought about that. But then that is directly applicable to this project I'm working on. And so I won't do that.
Right.
And it was like evidence of how important these lessons can be.
Yeah.
Which I was not used to that at that point. So it really taught me a lot of if it's a good idea. And then another manager, just real quick, was everybody says they're not a micromanager, but most people are.
Yeah.
Especially as you get up into management, I find. And so he was really not. And so he would say, you're really good at these things, and I suck. So you're going to make all the decisions about this thing. And when I failed, he'd come to me and say, where did I fail you so that we failed here? And so those two managers, I think, were the most impactful for me as a leader. Okay. And it really taught me a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. It's funny how much we take for granted because, you know, like as an entrepreneur, like I'm used to failing a lot. Like 99% of my ideas are stupid and they don't work. and my wife will confirm that. Maybe her statistic might be higher, but but the reality is that like we sort of just take that as just part of the territory of that's how business is done. You know, like you try something, if it doesn't work, you fix it and move on. And, you know, like, and not everyone necessarily comes at it with that same perspective, right? Like
a majority of people don't. And even people that feel like they do, they really don't. Right?
Yeah, their bar of like what's acceptable in terms of failures.
Yeah, it's a spectrum. Some people they give themselves grace, you know, like if they make a mistake. But if you're really in like an executive position with a lot of people underneath you, watching you, judging you constantly, because that's what happens in those jobs, you know, and you fail big, like it's hard. It's a hard thing to swallow.
I think the mistake that a lot of people make is not admitting failures too. It's like, if you fail, just admit, because that's the only time you can move on. Otherwise, you're insisting that something you did was that was wrong, obviously was right if you don't admit a mistake and you haven't learned from it.
And how detrimental to the organization when the leader can't even admit that they failed. And everybody knows. Like, that's the thing. I think a lot of leaders get stuck behind a facade or a persona or their ego or whatever that is for them. And they feel like people don't see the reality of what's going on. Everybody can see the reality of what's going on, right? And so, like, by you not, like, admitting it, it makes you look like you're not strong, not able to be honest, like, you know, or not authentic, whatever, fill in the blank.
The micromanager perspective is a little bit more nuanced, though, I feel like. That you know, because I'm both a micromanager and I can let people, you know, just do whatever, right? But and what's funny is that I think I grew up reading about, you know, initially like business-wise about Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and then like later on about like Jeff Bezos and, you know, now Elon Musk. And what's interesting about all of these people is that they're both micromanagers and, you know, like they have, you know, like their hands off on like huge ways as well. But like you could see their involvement at times for, you know, Steve Jobs' famous thing with the iPhone is that it has to have like one button. That's it, you know, like, or, you know, he participated in all of those product meetings or whatever. And you question, how can someone and one of the biggest criticisms he got was that he was too much of a micromanager. But how can you build such a huge empire being a micromanager? Is, you know, so there's definitely like some nuance there.
Yeah, I think people villainize it. Right? Like, oh, you're a micromanager. That means you suck as a manager. I don't say that.
Okay.
Right? I think, to your point, there are people that need to be micromanaged. They need to learn. Right? Like, if you had the iPhone project and multi-billion-dollar project, you're not going to let an intern go take creative authority over, like
Right.
it's too expensive. It's bad for the business. But there is, I think, a balance of the two, right? It's like, okay, baby steps. Certainly you need to teach and mentor. And sometimes that looks micromanagey.
Right.
And then other times there's a little bit more rope that's given.
Right.
And in my opinion, that's an effective way of managing. I've actually learned a tremendous amount about leadership from being involved in Startup Week because everybody is volunteers. So I need the website to be updated. I need sponsorships. I need, there's a tremendous amount of work to do, and everybody's doing it as a side hustle.
Yeah.
And so you can't say, oh, why didn't you told me you were going to do the website here and you didn't get it done? You can't say that.
Right, because they're like, okay, I'm done.
They're just being nice, being involved, right? So it's asking for a lot of forgiveness, and it's checking in and saying, is there a way that you could show me how it's done so I could help, or or can we double up a team effort, or what's happening, because life happens, and then someone's gone, and so it's been good. People are people. They need to be treated like humans.
Yeah. What do you think, like startups that you see, what are the biggest mistakes that they're making with respect to recruiting or HR or things that you feel you have like some expertise on that you can see that they're making mistakes in various different areas? But
well, I will say I talk to startups all the time, obviously, and I always hear about how they're fast growing, right?
Yeah.
Like we're going to double or triple in size in 6 to 18 months, and I always think to myself, like, I don't think that's really going to happen, right? I mean, it's a good story, right? It's so I would say one of the biggest mistakes that I hear or that I see, and I feel really passionate about actually, is telling an inauthentic story. So if you're not going to hit that metric, then don't claim that that's the metric to hit, right? You can say we're in an explosive time of growth. We're trying to triple, or whatever. But I think, concrete statements that are very large, and then when you don't hit them, you have a problem. Yeah. And I see this across.
You lose credibility.
And your credibility is like trust, right? Like you can't. It's so incredibly difficult to get it back once you've lost it. The other thing I'd say is, and this is in the same sort of vein as this idea of equity. I just had a conversation earlier today about equity, where, again, we have meaningful equity, blah, 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 and so you're pitching this story to employees that you're tripling, and like any kind of sane person would say, okay, you have equity. I have a couple questions to ask. Of course, they're not going to get an answer back because you're not willing to share that yet. And then you're going to triple it. And then what does that mean for me? So I think there's an authentic story is the first thing.
Right.
And then the second thing is, as a 30-person company, to grow to 130, let's just say, there are so many different components of your infrastructure that need to be built out in order for that to go well.
Yeah.
Right. And
what are some of them?
So like compensation banding, right? Training and development, the organizational structure and hierarchy, management training, IT,
sexual harassment training,
anti-bias training, like recruiting training. Really understanding your mission, vision, and values, and how each one of those employees is going to dramatically change the way it feels to work at that company, right?
Right.
And then I think recognition. This is one that a lever that I like to pull a lot. But if you're only recognizing a certain type of employee, and you alienate everybody else, they're going to disengage real quick. Right. Oh, I'm not like this guy, Bob. So I have no chance here. I have no future. And then, of course, career mapping and career planning, very, very, very difficult developing that, and really mandatory, and with many Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, millennial people, they're requiring it. But a lot of companies don't think about it until after the fact, and then developing it after the fact is really difficult.
Yeah. No,
so,
that makes sense.
How does it's sort of like the Maya Angelou quote of like, people remember how you made them feel, right? So think about your infrastructure, or think about your company. how do I make people feel, right? And then you have to multiply that by 3 as you're, building the plane as you fly it, as we like to say in entrepreneurial land. And some of those things you can't do well while flying, right? And so some of them will be subpar because that's all you can do if you haven't thought about it beforehand.
Are there companies in Arizona or in Phoenix that you think are doing a really good job, startups that...
Yeah, certainly the first one that pops in my mind is WebPT.
Okay.
Yeah, Heidi does a great job with her culture there. Let me think of some others.
Well, it's funny. The success that WebPT has had has been pretty amazing, and I think Heidi is brilliant. She's built how many people are they there now? Like they just in the 400 or 500 range.
Yeah, because the acquisition, I think they tripled or something crazy like that. It was notable.
Okay.
I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but a big win for Phoenix in general, and then also a testimony to, that, that deal came together because of the culture.
Yeah.
It shows how important getting your culture right and being consistent with it is.
Yeah. You mentioned Heidi. Who else do you think, people-wise, who are some of the people you have tremendous respect for in the Valley? That
Greg Scoresby.
Yeah.
Guy's
He's
tremendous.
Awesome.
Every time that guy talks, I find myself giggling. I don't know. He's just a funny, good guy. Who else? Brandon Wiley. I've really enjoyed watching him with Hound.
Okay. They just made an acquisition,
they
right?
just made an acquisition. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think. Traniel.
Oh, Chris
Ronzio.
Yeah.
Quick, Jamie Baxter.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm just thinking through my who did I have meetings with recently? There's a lot of momentum that's going on in the ecosystem with these new founders that are really digging in.
That's awesome. Now, all of the companies you just mentioned are SaaS companies.
I know.
So, going back to something you said earlier is that SaaS isn't really happening. You said something to that effect, and I was like, really?
Less so, maybe. But you're right.
What do you mean by less so?
Well, because I feel like maybe what is a better way of saying it is that there's more diversification in companies that are coming to the forefront, right? So yes, all of those companies that I mentioned are SaaS, you're right. But I'm thinking of there's a lot of news about manufacturing in the last month. There was
all these EV companies that are
and autonomous vehicles, right? There's a tremendous amount of money being made by the government into autonomous vehicles.
Can we talk about the EV companies in particular? Yeah. So we have Nikola, right? Which I don't know. Do you know anything about them?
No, I've notably I've seen the manufacturing news and haven't really
that was big news last year, but then their CEO and founder Trevor seemed quite shady and said all kinds of stuff, and then disappeared. Basically, he had to resign. The board is trying to figure
That's not a good look.
Yeah, no, it's weird. That company, I don't want to say is does not look like a very stable company. Let's just put it that way.
Yep.
And then we have Lucid Air, which has set up manufacturing. They actually look pretty legit, and they have manufacturing facility. Then another one. What was the one that makes the Solo?
Intel? No.
I just wrote about them. We have to take this out.
Yeah, well, no, it's fine. But anyway, there's 3 EV companies essentially that have set up manufacturing, but nothing is really cranking in that area yet. Right. None of them have delivered a single thing.
Yeah, I don't know how much of it is just people want it to work. And that's the thing. People want the call centers to turn into something else. Right. And maybe that's where the momentum is we don't want to be known for call centers, even though I think it's fine jobs for people, right? So we're going to do manufacturing, and so there's a lot of publicity, and I feel I've just been in a lot of conversations where manufacturing gets brought up a lot, and I'm not a manufacturing person. I don't know about that business at all. So I'm just like, can we do something else?
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, I'm biased towards SaaS, obviously.
Yeah.
But I love the activity that I'm seeing around us, and a lot of good stuff is happening. Mm-hmm. What else should we talk about?
What else should we talk about?
Life is 2021 starting out okay for you?
I feel a tremendous amount of hope. Yeah. I feel like life is good. Yeah. I'm very positive about the future. I think there's a lot of people that have learned a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to fix the screen time that my children
Oh my God, don't.
Like, it is horrible. It's like an addiction. It makes me feel bad even watching it. But, other than that, that's my biggest problem.
Yeah. And it gets progressively worse. My 15-year-old is like, his screen time is more than 10 hours a day.
I know.
Which is kind of insane because that's on a school day. When you think about like, how do you even have 10 hours? You're like in school for like 6 or 7 hours.
I know it. They're multitasking. I have to say to my 7-year-old, you can either have the TV or the tablet.
Right. Oh yeah, and he's like watching something
at
on
the same time. It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
and
pick one.
he watches stuff at like 1.5, 2 times. You know, he watches anime at like 1.5 or 2 times speed.
I know, and I'm thinking, what is going on in your brain right now?
Yeah.
Like, I showed him Thundercats.
What
because
is that?
You don't know about Thundercats?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay, look that up.
Okay.
So this was a cartoon when I was a kid.
Okay.
And so it's of course Netflix has it. There's Thundercats.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
And so there's a little. So this is the new one.
Okay.
Okay. So they've redone it, which is a shame. But it was really poor. Just like you go back and you look at Smurfs or anything G.I. Joe from 40 years ago or 30 something years ago. So I showed him this and he's like, this is so stupid. And then they had a new one, and so now it's good. But when he watches it, he watches YouTube.
Yeah.
And watches people playing video games on YouTube. And then he's playing a completely different video game.
Yeah.
And then all of the slang, I'm like, come and eat your dinner. Okay, bro. No,
bro.
I'm not bro. I'm mom. Right? Like, but it's 7.5. I don't know what we're going to do. All these, the brain waves. I had like an hour of TV a day when I was growing up. We were just told to get out of the house and go into the woods. Like,
you went outside and played, but that's not a thing anymore. Like, even if you wanted to do that for your kid, if nobody else's kid is outside,
right,
you can't do that.
My kid 7 doesn't know how to ride a bike. This is ridiculous to me because if you didn't have, and I said to him actually this weekend, when I have 3 brothers and me, I'm the only girl. We would hop on our bikes. I had a banana seat bike with a unicorn on it, and it was purple and white. And we would take off in the morning with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? And we knew the kids that knew how to ride their bikes. Yeah. And we would pick them up. And we would all be like this bike gang, like, riding around an Air Force base. I grew up in an Air Force base. And if you didn't know how to ride a bike, we would just be like, meet us at 1 at the pool.
Right.
See you there. You're going to miss all this stuff, So I think I just told him, I was like, people are not going to come pick you up if you don't know how to ride a bike. I'm a bad mom.
So not true either, because they'll come pick them up with an Uber.
Right. Yeah. And he's like, and he actually got me. He's like, Mom, I've seen 0 kids with a bike in front of our house. And he's right.
Yeah.
So
it's funny because we'd go out, play, like on days that, whether there was school or not, at some point you were basically out until dark, and then you'd come in for dinner, and that might be it. Yeah. And then you might watch some TV or whatever. Yeah. But you were outside playing most of the time.
Forever. Yeah. And it was about using your brain to entertain yourself.
Right.
Yeah. Or riding your bike or whatever. Yeah. And your parents never knew where you were. You were just somewhere.
Yeah. Well, when I was a kid, we also had paper routes. I don't know if that was a thing when you were a kid. You look younger than.
No, there was paper routes, and we also had we had penny candies at the dime store at the store on the corner, and so my dad would sit down in the couch when he got home from work, and all the change would fall out of his pocket. So we'd wait for him to get up, and then we'd dive in the cushions and get all the change. Yeah. So then it was about who could who could have the most penny candy, because that was real. That was bartering.
Yeah. How funny. Yeah, what a like different world in just one generation, essentially.
Yeah.
Like with the paper routes, we had to even go collect the money for the subscriptions. They didn't they didn't bill them. We'd have to like literally go knock on doors and be like, "Hi, sir, you owe us $7 for the month of January or whatever." And like,
I know, it's crazy. My son a friend of his came over to play, and he goes to a Montessori school, so there's first, second, and third graders in the same
Which
class.
one?
Villa Montessori.
Okay, yeah, we toured that.
Yeah, and so he has a third year. He's a second year. There's a third year that they have to type a 2-page paper to do this report. And the mom was like, "It takes my kids so long to type because all they know how to do is scroll."
Right.
Right? So here's the interesting thing. They don't know how to type. They're extremely able to navigate UI.
Yeah.
Like, on any kind of device.
They can now Zoom with anyone.
And my son the other day said to me and my husband, "I think we should take all my money. I have $200 in the bank that I've saved up for my birthday. I'm going to take your money and I'm going to take your money, and we should create a business."
Oh.
And we're like, "Okay, what are we going to do?" And he goes, "Well, I just got to get that equity."
I love it.
And we're like, "Do you know what equity is?" So he has like a natural bend towards being an entrepreneur, but he doesn't know how to type, and doesn't know anything else. It just that's the cool thing to do. And I think it starts at 7.
I got to get that equity.
I got to get that equity, and we're like dying. And I was like,
funny.
we had to do fractions and tell him about what that meant.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
I started my son early on teaching him about stocks and like what are stocks. Like you take a company, you divide it up into whatever number of pieces.
Yep.
That part is arbitrary, and he caught on so quick. I was shocked at because years later something came up with my daughter, and then he explained it to her, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
He's like 13 explaining it. Now he's 15, but like at 13 he was like explaining it to my daughter a couple years ago, and I was like blown away.
I feel like the thing I focus with my son on is about finances. How to save your money, what to use it for. Yeah. So my deal is I provide shelter and food and clothing for you. I don't buy toys. Ever. Okay. Never,
really?
ever. Nope. If you want a toy, you have to save.
Your own money.
Yep. And if you want to earn money, you can do
chores.
Work. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he has chores that he has to do because he's a member of the family and I'm not his maid, right? Yeah. So he has to take care of himself and his dog because that's his responsibility.
I love that.
But if I'm like, hey, we're moving soon. We bought a house, and so I'm like, I need to pack up the garage. This will be worth $30. Do you want to do it? And he's like, no, I want to pay my video games. Okay. And I go and I pack the garage, and then he's like, could you buy me a video game? Nope.
Do you stick to it though? Like really?
Yep. Well, I mean, with some exceptions. Like I've made 1 or 2 exceptions.
Yeah.
But yeah, he has $250 at Chase. He has his own account. He goes there and deposits, and he's like, I want to get out $50. Okay.
That's awesome.
And I've told him that when you get to be 16, however much you have, I'll match it for a car.
Yeah.
So if you want to have a car, then you need to save your money. And so I remind him sometimes because he is 7. He's like, I'm going to pull out my money and buy slushies for the whole neighborhood. And I'm like, car. So lemonade stands better. But
his heart is in the right place.
He is. Yeah. He's a very caring and giving person. But I feel like I see a lot of people just not knowing what to do, like general finance. Like how do you balance a checkbook? Or, how do you use interest for your benefit, or whatever. Like stuff like that. I feel like if he does not know how to do it, it's like swimming. He learned how to swim when he was a baby. Like he's never not known how to swim. Maybe that's setting him up for a good... It's
so important to know finances. It's just like a critical thing. I feel like a lot of the problems we have now with even things like student loans is a result of kids not knowing or understanding finances. How do you come out of college with $100,000 in debt not knowing that you could pay that off?
Right. Right. Here's a weird story about that. So I paid off my student loans last year, I think. And this doesn't make any sense to me. I'm just going to rant for a minute.
Okay.
So I pay off my student loans. So does my husband. And then our credit score goes down.
Oh, because
I don't have enough debt. This is crazy.
Yeah, I've heard of this before,
we had really good credit, and so we went to go buy a house, and then they ran our credit, and then he's like, what happened to our credit? And it was because we paid off our cars and we paid off our student loans.
Also, if you don't use credit cards or if you pay them off.
We pay them off every month.
Yeah.
Like, just because, I don't know, we're responsible,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And so, like,
you live within your means, goddammit.
And then you only use the credit card to get the points, whatever, and we go on vacation with the points, right?
Right.
So we have it figured out, and then we get dinged.
Yeah.
This is like crazy. So then we have to I was like, I think I have to take out some debt, even though we could pay cash for it, and
Right.
just to get my credit score up again.
It's so stupid.
It's dumb.
It's really dumb.
I feel like maybe that's where the problem is you're incentivized to not have good financial practices in your life. It's crazy.
I mean, because there's too many people making money off of, all the incentives are not where they should be, it seems like.
And it was like a big hit. It was like 50 points,
right.
because I paid off debt.
Right.
And I didn't have any debt.
Rather than having a loan where you weren't late on it.
Right. I wasn't late on it. I paid it.
That is viewed as a higher thing than not having the loan in the first place,
right.
or even finishing the loan,
so
which is kind of crazy.
I wiped out all my debt because we wanted to buy this house.
Right.
And boom. It's crazy.
Now your interest rate is higher.
I know. Come on.
So stupid.
It is dumb.
All right.
It's dumb.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Chatting with you and getting to know you a little bit more.
The opportunity.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
And thank you for everything you're doing for the community.
Oh, it's, I feel like I'm just working on hobbies. I'm loving it. I'm enjoying every minute of it. So.
Yeah, you can tell. It's good stuff.
Thank you.
It's good stuff. We'll be working together for this ecosystem. And
I think I owe you guys a title or something.
Yeah, we'll get you
sorry.
hooked up.
What do you think? What's a good talk that I should give? I haven't written anything down yet.
Yeah, no, you're probably going to tell your story, right?
Is that I don't know. I was thinking, have you read the book by Ben Horowitz, The Hard Thing About Hard Things?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's such a fantastic book.
Is.
And in his book, of course, he has his story, but then he has sort of formulaic answers to CEO or founder related questions. If you're in this situation, do if X, do Y. You know, and I found that book to be so helpful. And
you should do something like that. The hard things about being Hamid. I have a story about Ben Horowitz.
Oh yeah.
I worked at a startup in the Bay that was funded by him or backed by him, and we had some bumps.
Okay.
And so we had he came to this company to do an all hands meeting because the CEO of the company was stepping down.
Okay.
So, and the CEO was looked at as the brainchild of the product. It was a product company. So he comes in to do this talk, and we're all sitting around holy shit, it's Ben Horowitz, right? And
he's already big at this point, I take it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Andreessen Horowitz is Andreessen Horowitz.
Yeah.
So he comes in, and there's rap music playing. Yeah. And we're looking around. Anyway, the guy gets up, and he just has a handheld mic because it's an all hands. And he starts weaving this story together. It was so incredibly awesome. That guy is gifted.
Yeah.
At just how he told a story about how he believed in the founder. At the same time, he believed that this was the right thing for the founder and us. And then created this momentum that everybody walked out of that place,
super pumped.
And I'm we just lost our boss. The only person that has any product knowledge on the product that we're building. We're effectively screwed, but we're all happy about it. I don't know. But he was just such
effective person at doing that.
Yeah. I walked out of there thinking that guy is super talented.
That's awesome. What a what a great story. And what do you think?
The power of storytelling.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think of their new Clubhouse app?
So I just got on Clubhouse a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Vincent Orlick is get me on there, and I am going to be doing some Clubhouse broadcasts.
Rooms?
Rooms. Yeah. For Startup Week.
Okay.
I think I have some time booked with him like later this week, so I don't look like an idiot. So if anybody has any advice on that, but so I've heard really good things about it. I've clicked around, but I haven't spent much time.
Yeah.
I am always a fan of something that brings people together, and I think it's an interesting experience as a user being in a room and hearing lots of different people speaking, and it's kind of like a podcast on steroids, right?
Yeah, it's totally like it's kind of like Twitter, but with voice in real time.
Okay, fair.
I think because it's not unidirectional. People actually, the best rooms I think are the smaller rooms where a lot of people can speak. You know, like if you can get in there and like talk amongst a bunch of people that are either like on a topic that interests you. Those are the times where I find myself spending like 2 hours in a room, and I'm like, wow, I've been like, I'm still on this thing. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that's happened, which is mind blowing, is that you can start a room on any topic,
right? And
people will join, to varying degrees. So it's almost like having instant conferences. Like I started a room, like a SaaS Ask Me Anything, and like within minutes there was like 70 people in the room and asking all kinds of great questions about SaaS. And it was, again, 2 hours later, I'm like, I have to now leave to go eat dinner.
Right. Great resource for people in general. But the other thing that sort of struck me was it's a great resource right now in our history, right? So the rooms that I was joining was about diversity.
Nice.
Right? Like I wanted to learn what I didn't know, you know? And so to learn what you didn't know, that just requires you to listen, not talk.
Yeah, for sure.
So I was just like going into rooms and just listening to people, and the way what was most interesting was I was going into some, like I went into this room where Black advocates were talking about jobs and employment, and to hear the way they were feeling about their experience. I mean, I had a different level of empathy when I left that room than when I came.
Oh, wow.
Because
That's awesome.
like I wouldn't know their experience.
Right.
I don't have their experience, right? So,
and without something like that, there's no way to have known.
I wouldn't know.
Because you're not going to seek out such a event to go to. It's just,
But then even if I sought out an event, how am I going to get a panel, like and it's sometimes 70 people, all agreed and aligned on like how this makes them feel or how they're interpreting this thing.
Right.
And I'd be like, holy shit. Like I would have never, ever thought that.
Yeah.
But now I'm better because I know that, and so I won't do it.
Yeah.
So incrementally getting better, like that's all we can hope to do, right?
Yeah,
so,
totally. Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for the invite. This was really fun.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take
Appreciate
care.
it. You too. All right. Bye.